This is 22 News in Focus.
Good Sunday afternoon and welcome to 22 News in Focus. I'm Laura Hutchinson. April is Financial Literacy Month. People are always looking for ways to stretch their dollars, whether by cutting expenses or getting their money to work for them. And that's where 22 News in Focus comes in today. Today we'll be talking about the best way to organize your finances. Build that savings account now and put enough money away for retirement. We'll also be talking about this week's deadline for filing your taxes if you haven't already, and what you could do to be better prepared for next year and avoid falling victim to identity theft. We have a lot to get to today, but joining us first to talk about your personal finances, we have John Zalicki from Cambridge Credit Counseling. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So talk to me about Financial Literacy Month. First of all, why is it so important to have a month where we reevaluate our finances?
Just a good time.
I think that we last had you on around New Year's when everybody was setting their New Year's resolutions. So now by April, we've all dumped that already and we're back to our old habits. Maybe not, but so let's talk about what some people would like to accomplish. And one of those big things is credit cards. Let's talk about budgeting and saving in our next segment. But right now, I really want to talk about credit cards. First of all, how many credit cards is too many for one person? Let's first start there.
So that if something happens, the car breaks down, you can just use your debit card, pay $500, and not have to worry about accruing more credit card debt.
Okay, credit cards can obviously be scary because we're talking about debt and getting trapped in some of these loops, but they are very important for helping your credit score. So let's talk about some things that can help your credit score out. As we've been talking about paying off credit cards, I've heard that sometimes it's good to leave a card open so that you have you actually have open credit. So what do you recommend? How much open credit do you want to have? What would you recommend to people?
You want to have as much available open and just build up that emergency account that way. And again, some families can maybe start larger than others, but even if it's $5 a week, if that person's all they can save, within a few months they'll have a couple $100 hopefully in there and they can work. But again, you got to realize it's not going to happen overnight, and you got to start small.
Sure. And what about holidays and vacations? That could usually be the budget killer because you have something very expensive that you maybe know is coming, but you don't set money aside for. So, how do you sort of manage to still continue to do those vacations and buy people gifts for Christmas around that time, the holidays? So how do you recommend that people manage that all year? We're in April. How can you prepare for that now?
Right.
Statements and see where you're really spending.
Absolutely.
All right, John Zalicki, Cambridge Credit Counseling, thank you so much for talking to us. I really appreciate it. Some great information. And it's not just about your savings accounts you need to contribute to, it's also your retirement funds. We'll get to that after this. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. You're watching 22 News in Focus. April is Financial Literacy Month, which is why we've dedicated today's program to improving your finances. We spent the first part of today's program talking about credit cards and how much debt is too much and what you can do to effectively pay it down. We also talked about budgeting and saving. In just a little bit, we'll talk about this last week of tax filing season and what you can do to get your taxes done on time. Before we get to that, let's talk more about saving money. This time we're not talking about a rainy day savings account. We're talking about the money that you'll need to live on later in life. And joining us to talk about preparing for retirement, we have Mark Teed with Raymond James Financial. Thank you so much for one thing that people really struggle with is giving their kids everything. You want your kids to go to college, you want to take vacations with your kids. How do you balance that and also taking care of yourself as well, managing your own future? What do you say to people who come to you about that?
Well, there's an old saying, it's earned $4 and $5 over 4 and 5% over a long period of time. So the more risk you take, the more money you'll have at the end.
You're inspiring people to start saving for retirement. Thank you. And you only have a few more days to file your taxes. We'll talk to a tax preparer about getting them done on time and what you can do if you get audit. That's still ahead. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. It's your money, and today we're talking about ways to stretch your dollar farther. We spent the first part of today's program talking about the savings and retirement accounts and what you can do to protect yourself financially. Speaking of protecting yourself financially, you only have a couple more days to file your taxes, and that brings us to our next guest today. Joining us, we have Andy Flaherty, an H&R Block tax specialist.
Entitled to deduct, and other people take the standard deduction, which the government assigns. So it may be advantageous for you to add up your deductions rather than take the standard.
Okay,
Excuse me.
I know that there's a lot of credits that people are eligible for, and some people may have questions about who they should hire to get their taxes done. Let's take a short break, and we'll come back and finish our conversation
Great,
with
thank
that. Still a lot more, so we'll talk about that as well as what to do if you get audited. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus.
Right, because, you know, if you owe the IRS money, they can go back to day one. If they owe you money, they're only going to do the last 3 years worth.
That sounds fair. Yeah.
You know, so the idea is keep good. When the important tax documents come in, put them in a file, keep them separate, know why you need them, and when it's time to prepare your taxes, you'll be ready.
Okay, very good. Andy Flaherty, H&R Block tax specialist. Thank you so much for coming
you
on and
for
talking to
having
us.
me.
Good record keeping. Hang on to that paperwork. Ask good questions. Thank you so much. Some
Thank
great
you.
advice you've offered us today. And we'll have the last word for you after the break. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus.